It being 6:05, I'm going to call the meeting of the Charter. 6:05, I'm going to call the Charter. Has anybody heard from Rich? I know we had a conflict at 7, but I was under the impression he'd be here. I didn't know if anybody heard otherwise. No? Okay.
No.
All right. First on our agenda is to previous meeting minutes. Did anybody get a chance to see them? Did I get a chance to see them? Or did Lisa send them around, I think?
I thought I sent them to everybody. Did everybody get them?
I saw them. I'll make a motion. I'll make to approve the minutes. There's an echo. Other people getting an echo?
Yes. Is there a second on that?
I'll second it. Sorry.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. One of our agenda items is, just head it up. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. Was to have a discussion position. Lisa has been filling in ably, but I don't think it's what she wants to do necessarily. If I'm not speaking correctly.
Oh no, you're correct.
Okay. I was hoping Rich would be here so we could discuss this. Does anyone have another interest secretary?
I'll do it if nobody wants to. That's fine.
Okay. You have the utmost chair.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll make a motion that I continue to be the secretary.
Okay. I'll second that.
I'll second that and say thank you.
All right.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pete, did you wave your hand? Pete, I need you to unmute.
I'm sure he said yes.
I voted yes.
Okay, great.
Better than the alternative, isn't it?
Yeah. All right, so none opposed, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Lisa. You have our utmost appreciation.
Welcome.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Hayden from ACAM. I think Lisa, your mic is from the speaker. So I'm gonna mute you until it's time to talk. And if you could unmute. Thank you.
All right, I had time on the schedule for public comment. Tony Moquin as our email, just to back up, our email address was not set up correctly. And as a result, it was getting a lot of emails bounced backwards. Oh, Rich is looking for the Zoom link. Hold on 1 second. All right. Sorry about that. The email address was not set up correctly, so a lot of emails are getting bounced back. The original invite was sent out and received, however. In the meantime, this week, Wayne Norling essentially reset the email address. And while that was happening, Tony Moquin in the town manager's office sent out a reminder to all staff about tonight's meeting, and I have not heard from anybody. So, we'll continue to keep this open for feedback from town employees. Hi, Rich, are you in?
Got it. Thank you.
And we have a full committee.
So, Rick, I heard just from one department that they didn't see the email, I think, until this week, or they must have missed it the first time. And I encouraged them to prepare a written statement, and that there'd be plenty of public meetings going forward. So they didn't have to have anything for tonight.
Yeah. Rich, as a town employee, did you get the first email in mid-December?
I did not see any such email go out.
Okay. All right. Did you get the one that went out yesterday, though?
I did, yes.
Okay. All right. So it's just possible it went to some people, didn't go to others, because I did hear back from Leanne Adams for the original email as well as, I think, one other person. But as I was saying, Rich, the email address we were given wasn't set up correctly, and so we were getting a lot of bounce backs and undeliverables. So it's been reset. Hopefully it'll work better. And we'll figure out another time to specifically invite town staff, town department heads to get their feedback as well. The original plan was, I think, to have a general public meeting at the end of this month. I don't know if they'll be advised, so we can kind of push that back a little bit and just start to dig in on our own about looking at some of this stuff, if that makes sense to everybody. But as we see people around town, I would just encourage them to send any thoughts they have and let them know that we'll be having a meeting upcoming that they'll be able to attend and talk to and hear from us. All right, one moment.
Rick, can I just ask a question on that? I agree. I think if we're going to do a public meeting, we should do it when people can comfortably come out in the public. But do we want to think about having, and hopefully that's in February, right? Sometime if things get better, maybe. Do we want to have a separate public meeting that's just a Zoom meeting like this at sometime around the same time for people who still aren't comfortable going out? Like like 2 public meetings like that, or is that too much for us?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk in a little bit about for our next meeting, which is currently scheduled for, I believe the 26th, last Thursday in the month. We can continue to have that one, and again, try to get word out that this is an initial public information meeting, and we're just going to do it over Zoom, and then we'll have another one, and we can have 3, 4, 5, 6 more public meetings.
Sure.
Over the next year and a half. But we can, if people want to meet again on the 26th, we can do that. But we can talk about that a little bit later when we get to that in the agenda. In the meantime, why don't we start talking about Abington's town charter? So, Rich, last time, I'm going to share my screen for a moment. We started to kind of go over some general, larger, big picture issues. Sharing now. Okay. So I guess everybody can see that okay? No?
I had it a second ago.
Yeah, I saw it. Now I see us.
Okay. There you go.
That's it.
I was hoping to see you while I had it up. Yeah, so this is one thing we did, Rich, was just kind of break it up a little bit into topics. So good government, government structure, finances, committees and commissions, town services, administration. And this is going to be a document that we're going to keep on the town, on our webpage. We do have a webpage now, by the way, so that people can kind of track what things we're talking about, and maybe it'll generate a different idea. And our job, in the short term, isn't going to be to say, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. It's more just to collect information. Let me stop share. So that document is going to be, I'll be sharing it with everybody on the committee. But a version of it after every meeting is going to be part of the minutes. And the most recently approved one will be hosted on the webpage so people can take a look at it. And at some point down the road, we'll start to winnow through it and say, yes, we're going to move forward in pursuing this. No, we're not going to pursue this at this time, etc. But for now, it's just kind of a note to what are some of the ideas and suggestions that that's come up. It's kind of a yes and approach where yes, and we'll look at this versus a nah, this doesn't make any sense. So, Rich, was there anything on your mind? Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you bring that up, do we have access to any sort of emails for the town as it relates to the residents? Would that be something that we may be in our best interest as that's posted? Also send out a link to everybody with like a Google document with, okay, we've got these 10 questions for you that may have brief answers, even if we just make them check boxes of, yes, I think we should keep our 5-member selectman board. No, I think we should go to a mayor system. I think we should go to a mayor with represented districts or whatever the case may be. Our top couple of top subjects that we're talking about, would that be a good Google document to try to send out and get almost a survey and kind of gauge where people are thinking,
Yep.
And as far as public meetings, the beauty of Zoom is we can do as many public meetings as long as we're posted and stay within the parameters to, and obviously have somebody mitigate that because it's going to be crazy with everybody muting, unmuting, but having a good discussion via Zoom with as many people as want to join in.
Yep. Yeah. So, every meeting we have is a public meeting. But, there's, I think, specific ones where we want to specifically hear from residents and get their inputs and have a larger discussion. So, yeah, absolutely. And my understanding is the town has a contract with kind of an outreach firm. And part of that contract is they get like a survey a month, basically. And I think there's a willingness to have one of those months be a survey for the Charter Review Commission that would go out to everybody who has submitted their email address and want something from the town. And I think you're absolutely right that the questions are, we put 20 questions and do you want a mayor? Do you want a board of selectmen? Do you want representative town government? And, leave some space for them to submit answers. And yeah, I think that's definitely one of the things we want to do. I think William had started something like that at one point, right?
Yeah, I started just a Google form, just very generic, just try to start capturing something for when we're ready to send that out. Yeah,
so we can do that anytime. I think as long as we give the town kind of a few weeks heads up that we want to take advantage of that, just in case they have something scheduled. But,
yeah, and on the back end, like I have it, set up in my Google account, so we would just want to move it over to the committee's Google so we can gather it all in one place.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So maybe we'll put some stuff together, and at the next meeting we'll approve whatever the questionnaire would look like, and then we can work with the town to get it sent out. That sound okay? All right.
Sounds good.
Generally speaking, Rich, is there any burning topics on top of your head? It's been a couple meetings since we've seen you, so I don't know if you've heard of anything, thought of anything.
I thought of a couple of things. I know one of the things that I was open to discussing was the emergency management system. The way that it's set up is it's 100% underneath the police department.
Yep.
And I think that's an area that our town can certainly do better. Our dispatch is now centrally located in Holbrook, and that should hopefully help some of the police out as far as their communications, and hopefully that'll continue to improve. But I think that's something that, you know, we have 2 of the 3 services essentially between the ambulance, the fire department, and then the police department. And I think we should have, the fire department should have more involvement in the planning and or strategies. And I know there's federal grants out there and things like that, that we could take advantage and better prepare for the disasters or you know, incidents that we may have. You know, usually the tough ones are, hey, it's going to be a hot day out, we're going to have cooling centers. You know, that's a very basic, easy thing that having direct communications, and we're going to generally see those people that need that assistance, where they call 911, and it's usually through the ambulance for respiratory issues. So, you know, being included in that emergency management planning and things of that nature, having both department heads, or however we configure it, may be better utilizing that role and or language in the charter.
So are you referring to day-to-day emergency or kind of big disaster emergency?
Or it's more the emergency management. It would be big disasters, you know, like if we have a blizzard or something like that, and we activate the emergency management. There are departments, or towns, I should say, that have volunteers that come in for emergency management. I'm not saying that's what we need or want, but by having both department heads on board, we may be better to utilize some grants, and certainly some interdepartment communications, which may improve now that they've got a new leader at the police department as well. So just something to consider.
All right.
Rick?
It's on the list now.
Rick,
Yes.
I know that's also on the town manager's radar, just so you know.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah, he's brought it up a couple times in a couple different situations, so I know it's definitely top of mind for him. So I don't know how people feel about this. If we just literally started looking at the charter and went through section by section to see if anything jumps out. It's a little boring, but I think it might be just the best thing to start with. How do people feel about that?
Whatever you think's pertinent.
All right. I am going to bring up the town charter on the screen. This is going to be a very compelling video. For our friends at Abcam, I thought there was a way to share so that the what I'm sharing comes in and I can still see everybody's face. Is that still possible?
Yeah, I think that's on your end though. You'd have to mess around with the settings on Zoom.
Okay.
So if you share the screen, there should be a view option to do that.
Okay.
Rick, I think if you click on that upper right-hand corner and get view, you should be able to finagle or go in that direction.
I'm also on a Chromebook and there's some really weird options. So
Oh, gotcha.
what I might do is I think I'm going to send the link to our friends at Abcam and I'll have them pop it up. Does that make sense? Is that okay?
So you're going to send it to me and I'm going to share it?
Yeah, I'm just going to put it in the share box there. In the chat box. Just so we're all looking at the same page, basically.
There we go. Do you see it now?
How's that for everybody? All right. If you can click on section 1.1 there. Sorry, I'm putting it to work.
No worries.
All right, right there is good. Anybody have any issues there? I have something in 1.4, but anything before that? This is a lot of kind of legalese preamble.
I don't see anything.
All right. In 1.4, I feel like it's very redundant. That second sentence, if you look at it, it says, pursuant to this charter and subject only to limitations as may be imposed by the Constitution and statutes of the Commonwealth, it is the intent and purpose of this charter to confer on the town of Abington all the powers possible under the Constitution, the statutes of the Commonwealth. I feel like it could just start with, it is the intent and purpose of this charter. Again, this is just some like housekeeping, but it seems very redundant.
Yeah. It's redundant. I would just have us check that with counsel, because I wonder if that's some kind of crazy legal thing that we have to have in. Otherwise, it makes no sense, like you said.
I second that.
Yeah. All right, I will add that to the list. Could you go to 1.6? I mean, this is a part of me, and maybe William will find the same way, of some of the copy editing in here is driving me a little batty. Like, there's no reason the United States government should be capitalized.
Yeah.
And in 1.7, there should be a comma after is used. But I don't know how to respond to things like that. Section 2.2 is actually something that I do have a real question on. Can we get down to 2? You might have to go back.
Can we do 1.7 first? I'm sorry.
Yep.
I don't know how you choose what to define and what you don't define, and I don't know if we want. I don't know if we want to think about it as we're going through the rest of it to see if there's anything that we want to add to the definition list. I'm just not sure how and why our predecessors came up with this list.
Yep, that's a good note to keep in mind.
Okay, right. Sorry, 2.2, 2.3, 2.2.
So this is basically the presiding officer of town meeting.
Yep.
And it says that if the officer is, in the event of his absence or disability, that there's a deputy moderator appointed. We've seen Sean do this every session of town meeting. What it doesn't say, however, maybe I'm taking a very literal reading, is if the moderator has to temporarily recuse himself. It says absence or disability. He's not absent. He's not disabled. He's just recusing himself.
He has recused himself.
Yeah. But is that considered an absence?
That's a good question. I've seen language that specifically addresses that in another charter, and I can't put my mind on where it is exactly. There is almost like a second paragraph that says, in instances of potential conflict of interest, there is like some sort of recusal language, I think, that exists.
Yeah.
But I have seen him recuse himself for 1 or 2 items and then get back.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. My literal reading of this is that I don't know if that's considered an absence versus he's physically not in the building. He's sick. He's away. All right. So I'll put that on a list of things to check out.
And it may be he leaves the hall when that happens.
Yeah. I just don't know. And then in the next sentence, it says, in the event of the absence or disability of the moderator and deputy moderator, the town meeting shall elect from those voters present. It doesn't say who conducts that part. I mean, does that mean Rich Smith stands up from the body of town meeting and takes names and nominations and runs the vote? So I would clarify that to say maybe like the town clerk or does it, or the secretary of town meeting.
I think both are reasonable options. Certainly a good question.
Okay. Any other thoughts about section 2.2? Okay. Section 2.3, committees. The only question I have is, as we get into 2.3.2, which is about the finance committee and its role in town meeting, I'm not sure why this is there versus, so I think there's more on the finance committee's role later on in the charter. But, you know, there's that. There's also, it says, the committee shall hold one or more meetings to permit discussion on the subject matter of all articles. It doesn't say a public hearing or a publicly posted meeting, or it's just that they should, there's a conversation. I don't know if there needs to be a distinction, but you know, a public hearing is it's a legal term. It has things you have to do. And
So Rick,
yeah.
aren't all meetings of the FinCom public meetings unless they go into executive session, which I don't know what they could possibly have to do that for according to OML, but they are by definition public meetings because it's a town board.
But yeah, they don't have to allow public input during their meetings.
No, they don't.
So,
But that is, at any meeting, it's that way.
yeah.
Do you think we can write it into the charter that they should allow public input? I think that would be more of a bylaw question.
Yeah, and that's certainly something generally I want to discuss is to address that question about, you know, do we want to essentially make it required that there has to be a public discussion portion of each committee meeting?
You don't think that should be up to the particular committee?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's worth having a conversation to figure that out.
Okay.
But on this finance one, I don't know if there's why they chose to permit discussion. Maybe it's just to say that, you know, yes, people can always attend these meetings, but they aren't always allowed to speak. But in this situation, people can be allowed to speak or should be allowed to speak. So just wanted to raise that. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about it.
I think that can be a double-edged sword at sometimes, but especially as it comes to the FinCom, because they, as you know, you've been on the committee a bunch of times, that could be counterproductive. And at the same time, the amount of explanation that goes in at a budget meeting, and I know I don't want to speak for people, but there have been people that have said, if you've watched some of these meetings or attended some of these meetings, you'd be aware of how we came to these conclusions and things like that.
Yep.
So I think it's something it's good intent. I think we should just kind of keep an open mind as we discuss that further, that maybe we have them put that in the bylaws that they're able to change, but it's still I'm all for open dialogue and have everybody who's a member of the town have their ability to have a discussion.
I think, for instance, the Conservation Commission, they'll have a meeting where all they do is deliberate on like an order of conditions. You know, they're not taking public testimony. They're just there to this. I mean, if the purpose of the board is strictly deliberation, it makes sense that you don't necessarily have to have public input. It was more.
So then
I guess.
I'm sorry. So I think that requiring public input is taking it away from the control of the board of whether or not they allow everyone to speak at every moment. I mean, that it should be up to them whether they're taking public comment on a particular topic.
Okay.
Can I ask, at least the way they do things in Milton, every public, every meeting of every board has a citizen speak or public comment section as part of the agenda. Just by practice. That doesn't mean it's a conversation or discussion, but it allows anybody to speak their mind to any board. And I wonder if something like that would cover, people could make public comment on whatever's on the warrant, but it doesn't mean the finance committee has to respond to them at that meeting or ever technically, right?
But if we mandate public comment in the charter, it would take it away from the control of the board of whether or not they want to allow public comment on a particular topic.
Yeah.
It could be that board doesn't, for whatever reason, doesn't want to allow public comment.
Right.
And then they wouldn't have that control if we mandate it.
So one thing I suggested at a previous meeting is, just in a general sense, requiring committees to basically establish a public engagement set of rules that governs it, so that it can post it and let people know this is how we operate. When you come to a cultural arts council meeting, this is how we run it, and this is what's expected, and this is when we allow public comment, etc. So that people know that if they're going to the library board of trustees, that they have a 10-minute period at the start of the meeting where they take public comment, and then the rest of it is, unless it's a public hearing, it's up to the discretion of the chair. Because right now, I don't think those policies exist for most boards. It's kind of like some do, some don't, some might, some don't know what the rule is. People don't know whether they can be expected to say anything. It's part of having. Go ahead.
Don't you think that maybe that's more open meeting law training for the boards and committees?
Yeah, but I think open meeting law is a minimum of what you're allowed to do. I mean, the law doesn't say that you don't have to let people speak. It's more like, at a minimum, you have to do this. And my thought, frankly, is I'd like to have more public engagement, but let's do it in a very specific, spelled out way. Like, no speaker can go long more than 2 minutes. And boards are, you're allowed to speak to a board, but the board won't necessarily take up the issue because it might not be on the agenda. Kind of spell out those rules so people understand what they're getting into.
In the charter?
Yeah, well, if not in the charter, then in a bylaw. But I'd like to at least set the expectation that boards will do more than the bare minimum to encourage public involvement and engagement.
I don't think that sounds as daunting as it could be. If you put some language, just as an example, all the meetings will be run in accordance with an open meeting law, and they'll be conducted business under Robert's Rules of Order or something along those lines. Might make it a lot easier for other people and have a broader scope, but I think that's reasonable. I understand what you're trying to get at.
That is a given for a public board, though. That's a given for any town board.
Yeah, I mean, the school committee can decide that they're going to stick to what open meeting law is, and that's it, and that's fine. But that should be part of their board policy that they talk about every year when they reorganize. Or the planning board can decide something different, but that's something that the board discusses, and it's the official policy, and it's posted on the website so that people know what to expect. We can get into the details some other time if this is something we want to pursue, but
okay.
Think about it, mull it over, figure out what the pitfalls are.
We also want to see what's in the bylaws as well.
Yeah.
I looked quick and didn't see anything specific to FinCom at least.
Yeah, I guess personally I'm bothered when we posted on the front window of Town Hall. Done. I think we need to do more these days, unfortunately. Section 2.4 annual town meeting. as of right now, it just says there is a town meeting, but the bylaw sets the date. I don't think there's any reason to change that. Special town meeting, how that's called. I believe the bylaw specifies how voters can call a special town meeting.
I think that's state statute.
Is that state statute? Okay.
I think so. But it's probably in the bylaws too.
Okay. Clerk of the meeting. It doesn't speak to that previous issue we had talked about. I don't know if there's any other functions we think the town clerk in 2022 should be taking on, but that's something for consideration if there is anything. Section 2.7. So this might be an issue where we need to take a little bit of a look. Because of what happened last year, where I guess it's not really particularly well spelled out how this system works and whether it's easy for town moderator, town council to say, just to rule it out of order versus trying to work with someone to make it in order. Should there be any responsibility on the town's behalf or the moderator's behalf to work with petitioners to make it fit? I don't know. Should it be more than 10 voters needed to get something on the agenda? Yeah, I know the planning board got a little snippy because it's proposed a few zoning amendments in the past, and the Board of Selectmen said, no, we're not going to do this because we don't understand them. But I don't know if it's worth having carve-outs for specific boards. But we can come back to that if anyone has a thought. 2.8's about warrants and where they should be provided. I don't know if we want to get into how it's published and promoted. Section 2.9, availability of town officials at town meetings. I don't know if there's any reason people would have a problem having department heads speak at a town meeting. All right, we're good for that section for the moment. We switch over to Article 3. Look at us making progress. All right, elections and elected officials. So this spells out which offices are elected. And this might be an area people might want to revisit. This might not. I think there's some discussion about whether a board of sewer commissioners is needed anymore versus rolling it into DPW. But certainly that's a decision we'd want to make after meeting with the board and John Stone and figuring out how that works. But, if there are other committees that we want to make elected versus appointed or vice versa. I think there's some we're required to by statute have as elected boards. Board of Selectmen, moderator, school committee. But beyond that, I'm not sure how many are required statutorily to be elected. The next section is basically says you can't hold 2 elected offices at once. I don't know if it's worth saying you have to resign the first one before sworn into the second one. But I mean, there might just be a little detail. And then nomination of candidates might be an interesting issue, which is 313. Yep, you got it. Look right there in the middle. Whether 50 signatures are still the right number. Anyone who's run knows it's 50 can still be challenging. Is it too high? Is it too low? I'd be willing to have that up for discussion. So something maybe to consider. Anything in elections we'd want to talk about? Location of elections, day they're held. Do we like them on Saturdays versus Tuesdays? All of that could be discussed at some point. All right, move on from 3-1. 3-2, Board of Selectmen. Do we still want 5? Do we want 3, 7, 6? Do we want a Board of Selectmen? Do we want a town council?
Town council. I just felt like saying town council, but if we stay with a selectman, do we modernize it to select board? That's been what's happening in most towns in Massachusetts.
That is a conversation that I think is going to be raised.
Yeah.
The trend is to go with select board.
Right.
You can do select board, and then each individual member is referred to by their gender. So, I would be a selectman, and Lisa would be a select woman.
Right.
But it's the select board. So I think that's definitely going to be something that is brought up.
I don't want to debate it right now, but I mean, I think it's worth having on the agenda for one of the meetings a conversation about form of government.
Yeah, I mean, there are towns smaller than Abington in Massachusetts that have mayors.
Right.
And I don't know if we want to do that,
Right.
but if we start to hear from a swell of people saying, yeah, let's have a conversation about it, then let's have a conversation. And I think Bridgewater is a town, but it has a town council. I wouldn't recommend that form, but it's there. I think does Carver have a 3-member board of selectmen? There are a couple towns that still have a 3-member board of selectmen, and it doesn't work great. So Cohasset, until about 20 years ago, they actually had selectmen by district or by precinct, I think. I don't know if that would make much sense, but that's always something to think about and then shoot down. The one thing in here was about a vacancy in the Board of Selectmen up until 3 months before the town election, that there's a special town election held. So that means town elections in April, and on April 1st, on January 1st, a selectman resigns, that there would be a special election before the April town election. And I don't know if that's too close, or if that's no, it's that important of a board that we need to do it.
Well, I think those type of questions really reflect back on what our thoughts is moving towards a mayor system or things of that nature.
Yeah.
Overall, I think a lot of people are open about it, but I think that's one of those things that as a board, we should be discussing just the pros and cons, so that when we are approached about it, we can develop a thought process on it as a group.
Yeah. And I would be very careful to say that now we are not necessarily advocating for that. But
Correct.
at a point of due diligence.
Correct. I agree.
Should we have a further conversation?
Right.
Because I don't want the newspaper to say Abington considering switch to mayoral form of government.
Exactly. No. We just want to be able to say, we want to investigate and say that we have the correct form of government. We're not making any changes.
Right.
We have to talk about that.
Okay. Any other thoughts about that Board of Selectmen section? It comes up in a few other spots, some of their duties that I have more suggestions on, but like section D, I'm very curious to get a little bit more into. I think there's some weakness in how that happens, how the investigations happen, or it's not very clear as to how they work. So I think I would want to take a peek at that. Because I mean, technically, they can subpoena witnesses and take testimony, and it's almost like an administrative law board. So it might be worth just specifying some of that stuff.
Well, and if those powers are going to stay in place, would that be worth in that particular section, including 1 or 2 additional members for that board? Whether it be, as an example, the police chief. If they're going to subpoena somebody and question them, do we want to make sure the town council's there as well as the police chief or anybody else? Just to keep it open and above board.
Yep. Moderator, term of 3 years. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know if there's any other clarifications we want. I think right now his main job is overseeing town meeting, appointing the finance committee, appointing this board. I don't think there's any other real duties that need to be done. Has anyone seen anything in any other charters that maybe additionally? Okay. All right. Town clerk. Some towns have moved away from having an elected town clerk because it falls into this weird thing where the clerk is elected, but kind of then falls into a lot of the town hall, town manager stuff as well. I have no problem having an elected town clerk, but I don't know if anybody's heard anything or have thoughts on that. School committee, it's not much we can do with the school committee except for maybe make it bigger, because so much of it is just spelled out in state law. Board of Assessors, is that something that is still worth having elected versus appointed? I don't know if we can. Board of Health. I mean, a lot of the language for these boards are probably straightforward under what MGL requires. I'm curious as to why the Library Board of Trustees is 9 members versus 5 or whatever. I mean, it's by far the largest statutory board in town.
I think yes, it is the largest statutory board in town. I think there's something in statute that it has to be divisible by 3. I remember hearing that, and I think that that makes it either 3 or 9 because you can't really have 6. But it's worth having a conversation about the size of that. I agree.
They always have people filling it. They've never had a vacancy really that I can remember.
Not in the last 20 years that I can remember, at least. And
it runs wonderfully, so I don't want to necessarily monkey with things. But
well, I think we could talk to them. We could invite them in on that.
And if I understand, it's also the board that appoints the library director. That's not a town and manager appointee.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I know. So the trustees interview and choose the director, and I think it was either under the last charter review or the one before that they added language that says something like in consultation with the town manager, because the town manager really has oversight of everybody else in town. So there was trying to align with the town manager being the hiring agent, but in the case of the library director, they have the hire fire powers. And I think that might be state as well.
Okay. Yeah, it does say in consultation with the town manager, but it doesn't say what happens if the town manager says.
Yeah. I think they put it in as a compromise to make people happy, and it just went that way. Yeah. There's no ramification thing.
Pete, do you know anything about that section? We lose Pete.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay.
It
Can you
just
scroll
say-
that up so we can see the whole thing?
No, the in consultation with.
I'm sorry, which one?
3.8.
3.8.
My God,
Thank
if we
you.
have a situation where we have a dispute over the library director and the town manager, then things are really bad.
Well, it does go on at the end to say that in consultation with the town manager, who shall act in the capacity of the principal personnel officer of the town, as defined in Chapter 4 of this Section 4 of this chapter. So
I think historically at the time there was a dispute between the then town administrator or town manager about who had that right, and then the two groups came to this new language.
Which is kind of contradictory because it says the library trustees shall appoint.
Right.
And then it calls the TM the personnel officer.
yeah,
So
Right.
it's very, very unclear right there.
Yeah, I mean, I assume what it means is that if the library can pick the person, but the town manager can say, nope, I'm not hiring that person, go back.
But it says the trustees shall appoint.
Yeah.
So who appoints? I think we need to clarify that.
Yeah. All right. Board of Sewer Commissioners, as I said earlier, this is, of course, no reflection of the board members or their work. But now that the system has been installed and upgraded, I would be open to consideration of whether this is needed anymore versus a general facilities committee or an advisory board to the Board of Selectmen. I don't know, but I certainly would like to have a conversation just to find out what the story is. Again, no reflection of the people who are on the board or the work they've done, but at this point, I just don't know. Water commissioners, I think a lot of it is spelled out in our 130-year-old contract with the waterworks. Housing authority is specified a lot in Mass General Law. I think last time they tried to make it 3 years and they had to go back and expand it to 5 years. The state requires 5-year terms instead of 3-year terms. Planning board is 5 members for 5 years each. I don't know if that's required. I don't know. Board of Selectmen does 3-year terms. A lot of other boards do 3-year terms. This is one of those rare ones that has a 5-year term.
Well, and let's face it, sometimes things they take a little bit longer, and having the consistency of having members on the board for 5 years may lead to having good, prudent planning.
Yeah.
what I'm thinking.
And then we get into recall, and we'll, as we get to the end of this section, maybe we'll just pause there. There's a very lengthy procedure for recalling officials, and I really hope we never have to really use it. But, it starts with 25 voters can start the process. And then there's a whole set of actions.
Rick, is that one of those things that we'd consider maybe bumping that up to 50? I mean, if it's 50 to get on for any sort of elected office,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Is that reasonable to move that up? I mean,
Yeah.
It's very easy to have 25 people with a vendetta or a grudge to move forward with something like that. whether it be warranted or unwarranted. You know what I mean?
Yep. It's 10 people to put something on the town meeting warrant. I think it's 100 people at the special town meeting. There's not a lot of consistency in how many signatures I needed for things. So
I think we should look at all the numbers.
yeah. And then I think they have to go back and then they have to get more signatures. I'm trying to think where that is. Yeah, then they have to get a petition signed by at least 20% of the registered voters of the town.
I was just reading that as well.
Yeah. Which I don't understand why you have that two-step process. All right. Well, we'll take another look at that, but again, something I hope we don't have to use. Vacancy in office section 314, and I think there's some work that we can do in there. We've seen this become an issue with the Board of Selectmen the past few months with how vacancies are filled. And because the process is actually different, whether it's a elected board or an appointed board. There's confusion over how long things have to be posted before it can be acted upon. There's some confusion over how long things can be posted. And then if you don't get a good candidate, can it be reposted again using the same slate of people you got before? I would argue that especially when it's a situation of an elected board, that the elected board should be able to nominate the first person. We saw last time that, with the Board of Health, the Board of Selectmen made the nomination and then basically told the Board of Health who it's going to have. And the Board of Health didn't have a chance to say, no, we would prefer this candidate. So, I would prefer that, especially when it's an elected board, that they get at least a chance to say, we would prefer this person on our board.
Input. I thought it was a joint meeting.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit.
I thought it was a joint meeting.
It is.
I don't
but
understand how the.
it comes down to who makes the nomination. First. So, if someone on the Board of Selectmen or a draw, the Board of Health, the Planning Board, the school committee, whoever it is, I just think that board should be able to say, to make the first motion, I guess.
I think I've seen charters or bylaws with language that have the board or committee will make a nomination to the select board, and it doesn't even have the language about posting it and the rest of it. So, like, the first step is, the committee makes a candidate, and then if they can't come to agreement, the second step is to do the posting. So, but even so, the language here, even the part about the filling of such vacancy shall be by a joint vote of those members of the Board of Selectmen and those members of such board or committee who are in attendance. But it doesn't say whose meeting it is. I know it's a joint meeting, but it's kind of gray to me.
Yeah. So there's definitely some complexities in here that can be, I think, simplified. And I think this might be an area where we can look at a different town and see how they word this, if it makes more sense. Yeah. Okay. So those are the first three sections. It's a little after 7. we have a couple of other quick housekeeping things to do. So if we'll pause here for the actual review at this point. Any other thoughts about this before we move on to something else? Okay, plenty of time to go back if we do. So next on the agenda is, well, actually, because it says other town charters, did everybody get a copy of the 2004 report?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I have not made my way through, but I assume it will be interesting to read. And I'm wondering if we want to invite a couple of those people specifically to a future meeting. Because they're all still around, basically.
Yeah, I think that wouldn't hurt. Could be informative for us. And I, looking at what you sent around, I did like the basic summary of charter revisions sheet that they had with the current versus proposed, how that was set side by side,
Yeah.
and then article by article explanation. I thought it's a good model for us.
Yeah, and I liked how it was just basically, this is the final report. This is what we're doing. This is what we've done. It's something to keep in mind. I didn't see one for 2014. So this is just the one we have. All right. So do we still want to meet on the 26th or the 27th?
I think it was
27th. Does that work?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Lisa. What was that?
Lisa.
Yes.
Yes.
Pete, how does that work for you?
That worked fine.
Excellent. All right.
I have a work commitment at 7 that night, but I can do the 6 to 7.
Okay, we can make that work. Rich, how about for you?
I have a work commitment as well, but that's something that if we're going to continue via Zoom, I should be able to make it happen.
Is it a 7 o'clock thing as well?
I'm essentially on shift, so
Oh,
I'll
okay.
get somebody to cover me.
Rich, what days are generally better and which ones are worse for you? Does it all just vary?
It all varies. They rotate 1 on, 3 off. So it's hard to hit the moving target, but just throw them out and I'll make accommodations.
I thought you said at one point you have like a monthly union meeting.
We typically do. It's the first Thursday of every month.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. All right, so I think second Thursday of the month is where we kind of have been trying to meet. So what we'll do is we'll meet this Thursday, the last Thursday this month, just to, again, try to pick up some speed here. And then generally we will meet the second Thursday of the month moving forward. Does that work? Make sense? Okay.
Sounds good to me. And that 27th will give us 2 weeks off, and then we'll be right back into that second week of February.
Yep. And then we don't have to meet every 2 weeks, but I think the goal is at least to start to get some public input. And we didn't tonight. Maybe we will in 2 weeks, just to start to inform some of the discussions that we're having. All right.
Sounds like a plan.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said, sounds like a plan.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion points for this evening? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
All right. Motion from Pete. To a second. Second from Rich. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Lisa, again, thank you for being our secretary. And we are done.